Okay, let's get this out of the way. I know if you watched the last video, you're probably slightly confused. Hey, he said he was going to review a Master System soccer game. Well, yes, you're right, I did say that. And if you didn't watch the last video and have no idea what I'm talking about, well, shame on you. Go watch it. I'll wait. Wow, that's amazing. In the future, you can watch a 20-minute video in 10 seconds. You must be one of those fifth dimension creatures from Interstellar, huh? Cool. Anyway, in all seriousness, yes, I was originally planning on reviewing Great Soccer for the Master System. And I still will, hopefully before the Women's World Cup is over with. But when I started to look at the game and its somewhat confusing history, there's two games called Great Soccer for the Master System. And the fact it's one of three Master System games compatible with the Sega pad, I figured I'd better hold off until I was able to do some more research and be able to put together a better video. So instead, I had to come up with a replacement video, and one for a game that was somewhat simple, as this week I'm going out of town on vacation and I needed to put something together relatively quick, so I could get this video uploaded before I left. I went over to the shelf, and a game that I'd really never paid much attention to ended up standing out to me. And that would be Shooting Gallery for the Master System. Why did this game stand out to me? Well, the previous video I was referring to earlier was for a game called Ground Zero Texas, which I described as a full motion video shooting gallery. So when I saw this, I thought, well, hell, since I just did a more modern one, why not do the original? And so that's how we got here. So without further ado, let's take a look at a game that does not feature Danny Trejo. Okay, Shooting Gallery. Looking at the front, you can see the usual early Master System font, labeling the name across the top, and apparently this game is 1 megabit. As you can see, it's part of the Mega cartridge series. Also up top, you'll notice this game is part of the Light Phaser series as well, meaning that the game is only playable with a light phaser. Since I don't have a working CRT or light phaser, for this review I'll be playing the game on my computer with a mouse, similar to how we did Safari Hunt. Toward the bottom, you'll see the usual somewhat simplistic graphics that they used back in the early Master System line. And it's a duck and some holes revealing a brick wall? Well, this doesn't make sense right now, but it will when we get to the game itself. On the back, we've got screenshots from 2 different levels in the game, showing the birds level and the balloons level there, and the usual description of the game right below. As we look at the case itself, this clamshell is in nearly perfect shape. Really looks good. And I'm assuming this game was, since it was a light phaser game, it probably just spent a lot of time collecting dust on the shelf, which is why it's still held up in such good shape. The inner cover is all fully intact, and hang tab on it looked good, everything. And then as we open it up, you'll see the cartridge in great shape as well. And along with the manual, the whole package has been kept in just really, I mean, not quite pristine shape, but it looks really well taken care of. Below the manual, you'll see one of the early Sega advertising posters here. And I'll go ahead and unfold this real quick, just in case you haven't seen one of these before. On the one side, we've got advertisements for the various games that were coming out with screenshots. And on the back, you get the nice little poster that you could hang up if you wanted to. Go ahead and get that back in there without messing it up. There we go. Now, a manual for a shooting gallery type game doesn't really need to be that in depth, but I gotta say they did a great job with this manual. The manual explains the game and how to play, and shows off the 4 different types of levels. right here. And it also gives some nice hints and tips for gameplay, like there, and then there as well. And then provides separate score pages so you can write down different high scores depending on how far away you were from the screen when you were attempting those scores. And then beyond that, I like the sense of humor the manual has with oops like, you know, let's see, let me find one of them. Like here, it says, oops, try again. Or later on, so we lied. You know, just, they really took a manual that no one would care if it was super boring, because that's what people expect from a simple game like this. It made it interesting. I love that. Just because a game is simple doesn't mean you should have just half-assed documentation. Now that we've checked out the packaging, let's take a look at the game itself and see if that same sense of fun is translated over to it. Shooting Gallery. As previously stated, this gameplay footage is courtesy of an emulator, this time around using RetroArch and the Genesis Plus GX emulator. The reason why I switched from Sega to RetroArch Genesis Plus is because when I did the Safari Hunt video, Sega exported the video with a Sega-specific codec, which is fine for playback on the PC, but was no bueno for adding into PowerDirector. So I ended up having to re-encode the video and audio into a format that PowerDirector could use. So, after wasting a day trying to figure out the MAME/Menace integration to play Master System games, I decided to use RetroArch instead. This in turn took a while to figure out how to configure it so that the mouse would function as a light gun, but after some tweaking, I finally got everything working to my liking, recorded some gameplay footage, and PowerDirector still didn't like it. However, at least the codec used this time by RetroArch was more friendly with the Handbrake video converter, and I was able to get the video into PowerDirector without it looking or sounding too trashed. I'll probably use the same method in the future for all the other light gun games, as while it's not perfect, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Unless, of course, someone like Hyperkin releases a Genesis light gun that works on flat screen TVs, of course. If you have any questions about the software used here, feel free to comment on the video, and I'll try to explain it in a little more detail. Back to the game, the title screen shows a cop shooting at a colorful picture in front of a wall, and I guess that's as close to a storyline as we have here, and serves to explain why missed shots decorate the background with bullet holes. It's not worth thinking about that much, but I do think it's a really cool graphical feature. Most light gun games, when you miss, but here, if you're off target, you'll decorate the screen with holes illustrating your failures. And I do mean illustrate. One thing that I'm almost always impressed by in these early Master System games is how good they look. And Shooting Gallery is no different. Compared to Safari Hunt, Shooting Gallery is slightly more advanced. The backgrounds are very simplistic, but they make sense when you remember the concept of the game, sort of being a virtual shooting gallery at the fair or carnival. Also, the backgrounds being subdued and simpler make it easier to focus on the various targets on the screen, which is critical for advancing in the game. The targets change based on what level you're playing, but they all look very detailed, and are well animated, and are very colorful. The birds in Just for the Birds levels, and the balloons in Aerial Attack levels specifically stand out. The sound in the game isn't bad either. All of the sound effects are good, from when you actually shoot, to when the targets are destroyed, or just the sounds that the targets make as they go across the screen, like the flapping of the bird's wings. If you're good enough to hit all the targets in a level, not only will you get a score bonus, but you'll also get a bit of speech and a sound effect that's saying, perfect. The speech is a bit rough, but in their defense, there wasn't a whole lot of speech going on in home console games back then outside of Impossible Mission. Also, each of the 4 system stages have their own music, and all 4 tracks are appropriate and sound decent, if not slightly shrill. The sound of the game definitely isn't as impressive as colorful graphics, but for 1987, I've heard far worse. One thing that isn't usually a plus in an older game is physics. Usually games in the 8-bit era were more concerned with just simply getting a character from point A to point B, and if the game happened to involve running and jumping, it always seemed to be a toss-up as to whether the developers would get the momentum correct as the characters moved across the screen. Shooting Gallery isn't a platformer, obviously, but it does have two good examples of cool or well-applied physics. In the aforementioned aerial attack levels, some of your targets are pretty standard floating red balloons. When you take aim at the balloons, you have to be careful of just where you shoot, as the ensuing balloon pop will push the remaining balloons across the screen, making it harder to zero in on the other balloon targets. And on the twisting tubes levels, you'll have to watch where the balls are flying across the screen, and be able to predict where they'll end up based on their trajectory. But that trajectory always makes sense and seems appropriate. If you miss a target, it's because you shot in the wrong location, not because the balls end up somewhere they weren't supposed to be. Having said all that about the physics of the game plays well. However, the difficulty ramps up very quickly. By the time you hit level 6, which is the second Twisting Tubes level, you'll probably be struggling to keep up with the speed of the action. Compounding the reaction time necessary to keep up with multiple targets on screen is the gameplay mechanic which causes your gun to shoot shots in succession quicker if you make contact, versus a slight delay if you miss a shot. This makes missing by the time you get to the first TV Terror level a near death sentence, as the gimmick to TV Terror is that while the ships move slower than the targets on the previous levels, they have shields, and you can only hit them when they briefly drop their shields. Trying to hit multiple targets in a split second is probably easier with a phaser, as the game was originally designed, but with a mouse, near impossible. If you happen to get lucky and pass both of the first TV Terror levels, you'll be visited by the fouls from Just for the Birds again, only this time their patterns will be much faster and more erratic. It was at this point that I recognized my limits and gave up. I simply can't imagine getting through 24 total levels in this pattern with how crazy level 9 was. All in all, I'm giving Shooting Gallery 3 stars. I think it's a solid effort for the time period, and it's definitely more advanced than Safari Hunt was. Had it been slightly less difficult, I could see it even approaching 4 stars. But as is, if you're looking to play light phaser titles in the Master System, this is a nice release for its era. Well, there you have it. Our second light phaser-centric title for the Master System. The Master System had a few more titles in this genre that we'll get to, before they gave up on the platform and effectively took Sega out of the light gun business until the Menacer and Justifier would show up in 1992. It's unfortunate these original light guns don't function on flat-screen TVs, but due to the popularity of retro games currently, there are people that are working on tech to get around this, so hopefully these games will be able to be played as originally intended again soon, without having to have an old-school tube TV taking space in your game room. Tune in next week when we take a look at a game I just picked up for the Genesis, and that I've never played before. It should be interesting, and hopefully it'll be good. Until next time, whatever you're playing, have fun, and be excellent to each other. Later.